So the first thing was the Trellis Trial. Sauvignon Blanc trellises have evolved over time, and we did this trial in Mendocino County because when I was dreaming this up, Fetzer Vineyards had a major interest in growing Sauvignon Blanc and starting a program for Bonterra, their organic label, and they had some open vineyard space, and I said, well, boy, do I have a deal for you. And this is how we got both of the trials in the same place. It was done in Mendocino. Sorry about that, Lake County, but I think that the research. Sure, I think the research results will be fine. What we want to do is maximize yields and have uniform ripeness, high quality fruit, and mechanize as much as we can. So it's basically using a VSP trellis system. When we spur prune Sauvignon Blanc, we run up with this problem, fruit on fruit. And if you're hand harvesting, it's hard to harvest this because it has a short peduncle, as we said before, so the little stem on the clusters is hard to get to. And if it rains, you really have a big problem because it turns into instant mush. So in 2010, we had, the perfect storm for rot, and we could really see it. What we would prefer is something like this where the fruit is well separated. So what we used was our standard VSP spur prune system. We used a VSP with 4-stack canes. We used a VSP system that was spur pruned that had a floppy top, so to give a little more shade and prevent sunburn. Then we had a hybrid cane system that uses 3 to 4 short canes on a vine, and then 4 parallel canes. Instead of stacking them, we have them side by side. So they're all based on VSP so that we could mechanize them easily, and we did all the scientific stuff that you're supposed to do in terms of experimental design. Spacing was 8 foot by 7 foot in row. It's a vigorous site, and they were planted as dormant bench grafts in 2004, and the vineyard is farm certified organic. So we take kind of the standard viticultural data, yield per vine, cluster number per vines, pruning weights, bud numbers, 100 berry samples, and then run the chemistry on it. Here's a look at some of the different trellis systems. This is sort of our standard spur pruning, and they like yield, so that we might have 3 bud spurs on this. And this is what it looks like at harvest. Again, we've got fruit on top of fruit, which isn't ideal, but yet this is a standard system that's used in a lot of places. Here's a 4-stack cane, so 2 canes going each direction, separated by about 8 to 10 inches on wire. This is a pretty standard system that we see in Lake County, and the Lake County guys might even put another set of canes on top of that, so we have some 6-cane systems, so you really get some big yields.
Okay, so that's what I saw that
Yep.
caught me off guard, the 6-cane system.
Yep.
Okay.
And this is what it looks like at harvest. It's pretty good. You have some separation of fruit, and one thing that's a little different, though, when we checked, we see that there's different in ripeness from top to bottom. But that's okay, because ripe flavors and green flavors in Sauvignon Blanc make for a more interesting wine in most cases. Here's the hybrid cane system, and it's a little hard probably for you to see, but essentially what we do is we have 3 or 4 canes that are all going the same direction, along with a renewal spur. And what's really nice is you have fruit at the same layer, and pretty good yields. So this is a system that's used by Beckstoffer Vineyards over in Mendocino County, primarily for Chardonnay, but I've also seen it used in other vineyards in Mendocino County. I've not seen this used in Lake. And finally, this is another Lake County invention. This is the 4 parallel canes where the fruit is side by side, and this is at harvest. I don't have a dormant picture, but essentially the canes are separated by about 1 foot, so it's kind of like a condensed divided canopy. Except you don't have to go through all the manipulations. So what we look at is the bud counts, and bud counts are really, really important because if you want to grow fruit, you need buds. So if you go down the bottom of that, where we look at the 4 canes stacked and 4 parallel canes, we're at 52 and 48 buds, whereas compared to bilateral cordon, we have 42 buds. Just pay attention to the column on the right, which we take a look at what the average yields were over the course of the experiment. You can see there's a definite advantage to going with more buds, and the cane systems definitely have the best yields at 9.5 and 9.1 tons per acre versus 5.8 and 5.5 for the cordon systems, and then the hybrid cane systems in between. The fruit chemistry, pretty similar except for sugar. So the acidity and the pH are the same pretty much for all the treatments, but you can see there's a big difference in terms of ripening. So if you're in a situation where you got to get stuff ripe, go with the cordon system or control the size of your canes or bud number, because I think we made sugar for most programs, so most winemakers would be okay with 20.7, but and 23.2 would probably be a little bit too much. But if you're in a place where the season's a little bit shorter, a little bit more coastal, you probably want those shorter ripening periods compared to the ones that take longer. So there's a difference of about probably 1 to 2 weeks with these training systems. This is something that makes scientists really interested, and this is the best regression curve I've ever generated in any of my research, is a correlation of 95%. And some of my viticulture friends said, "Oh, you dry lab that. You made that up. That's not real." But it is. So there's a real high correlation between yield, cluster count, and cluster weight when you use these systems. So conclusions: if you want yield, prune for more buds and clusters at harvest. If we're short growing seasons, spur systems have less fruit and ripen better. And for the longer season areas, 4 cane systems give you your greatest yields. We find that we can get good fruit separation in those 4 cane systems. However, side by side is a little better in terms of evenness of ripening compared to stacked cane systems. So there's a little bit difference of about maybe 1.5% bricks between the top and the bottom layer. Side by side is probably only about half a brick, so that's a better system because the fruit's on the same plane. And the hybrid cane system that we use with the short canes I liked a lot. It's easy to pick, it's uniform ripening and good yield, so it's kind of in between the 2 techniques. So that's it for that. Part 2 is our clonal trial at the same place. And what we want to do here is take a look at new clonal materials because, again, we have a richness of clones, a lot of diversity in this cultivar that it's not like Zinfandel where all the clones are very similar. They're quite different. And we're also interested to see, are we still on the right track with FPS Clone 1? Is that still a good clone, or is there something better out there that we're not paying attention to? So we, again, used 12 clones and did everything right scientifically in terms of replicating it and doing something that was statistically valid where we could separate out the differences between the clones and speak with certainty about whether or not they really are different. These were the sources of the clones that we use. California Clone 1, we had 2 from Italy, a bunch from France, Clone 14, and CTPS 317 and 242. We had 2 heritage clones, the UC Oakville Field Station clone, which we've talked about, and then Clone 26, I'm a little confused. I thought that was the one that was from Tokelon. That is from Tokelon, okay. And then the Sauvignon Muscat clone, which we wanted to find out once and for all, is it really Muscat flavored or is it just a name? Here is a nice picture of them, which I really, really like because it illustrates that there's a lot of clonal difference. So if we look at the upper left-hand corner where we have FPS 1 compared to the French clone 25 or 26, those clones are quite a bit smaller. And you know, they're looser too, so that's kind of an advantage if you're in a humid area. You would be able to have potentially less rot problems and ripen them sooner. Again, let's just go over to the column on the right is the most important, and what we look at there is we can see that the clones for FPS 1 was about 8.5 tons per acre at the high end, and 4.7 for FPS 7 at the low end, or even 4.3 for 14. So there's quite a range just based on the size of clusters and the numbers of clusters that you get. On the bottom, you can see the total experimental averages, and this is not a shy site. Even with all the clones, it yields pretty well. So in 2009, it was kind of when we were starting at 5 tons in the 4th leaf, and we ended up with, on average for 4 years, of 6.3 tons per acre. Average cluster numbers varied, and you can see Clone 1 puts out a lot of clusters. It's really the champ. And Clone 17 comes close, but nobody else does. Cluster weights vary quite a lot too. Again, if we look at the right-hand column, we can see that we have a range of 97 grams for clone 7 up to 135 grams for clone 1. So clone 1's a pretty mongo vine when you get down to it. You know, it's just got a lot of oomph and it really delivers. Fruit chemistry, again, not too much difference in fruit chemistry other than in ripening. So this seems to be sort of standard. We get pretty good acid and pH from all the clones, but ripening is quite different. Clone 7 and 22 are up in the 22 Brix range, and then we can see some of the higher yielders not so much. So again, if you choose for smaller clusters, you're going to be able to ripen better. So if you're in a situation where you need to have fruit that's going to ripen better because it's cool or a site that somehow limits your growth, a short season, then you probably want to go with these smaller clustered clones. So this was tougher, but this was on the basis of where we got a bunch of industry people together, and it doesn't really stand out. I would never try to publish these data, but nonetheless, we can see that there are differences in terms of perceived wine flavors in the clones. In terms of aromatics and fruit flavors, clone 1 really stands up pretty well. 17, 25, 26, and 27 are all good clones. And that's why I kind of chose them today so that you could taste them. The experimental wines made by Gallo for us, and they adjusted sugars and tried to get everything to be pretty much the same alcohol, so alcohol wasn't a confounding factor. This is again with mouthfeel. The FPS 25 stood out. Most of the others were very similar. And acidity, Clone 18 stood out compared to the others. These are things that, you know, acidity can get fixed in the winery pretty easy with either tartaric or malolactic fermentation, so we don't worry too much about that. I figure the winemakers will do their magic and make it all better. So kind of the conclusions, there's a lot of genetic diversity in Sauvignon Blanc clones in the UC Davis Foundation Plant Services clonal collection. It's really hard to convince people to put a lot of diverse material out into the field when we have clone 1 because it's a good clone. It makes good wine, it yields well. So we don't feel as compelling a need as we have with some of our other cultivars like Pinot Noir and Cabernet to really do a lot of experimentation with it. But other clones with smaller clusters may be more suitable for cooler areas so that they ripen sooner compared to the clones with large clusters. And certainly different flavor profiles exist between the clones. So you have the innate flavor differences in the clones, but additionally you have what you can do in the winery. So this is really kind of hard to tease out to figure out whether you really have differences. And I think by the end of today, you'll see the various ways that we can manipulate wine flavors in the winery and in the vineyard both. So just want to thank Fetzer Vineyards, Lake County Grapevine Nursery, no longer with us, but you know, they propagated everything. Deborah Galino, who suggested the clones and got them for me. American Vineyard Foundation, Viticulture Consortium West funded part of this research. Nick DeKuzlian and Gallo Winery and the Lake County Wine Grape Commission for today. And I just want to give a little recognition to our dream team during this event. When I had the vineyard going, Chad Boardman, Bob Blue, and Dave Cobal were all really supportive of me and always went to the mat when I needed stuff. They were fantastic collaborators, so thank you very much. My own technicians and finally the pickers. Boy, did we have to work hard to get through this trial. There's a lot of picking when you have as much as we did. It would take us 2 days to go through and weigh each vine and count clusters, and I really appreciate all the effort. Thank you.